The story kicks off with a group of kids full of dreams. One of them excitedly says they should become treasure hunters, imagining themselves venturing to treasure vaults around the world, claiming riches and glory. The others are fired up by the idea, agreeing that the 6 of them together could achieve their dream of becoming the strongest heroes in the world. Then the red-haired kid even mentions they should head to the capital Zabrudia one day. The scene then jumps to the present day, and we see a cloaked man walking the bustling streets, musing about the life of treasure hunters. He explains that treasure hunters are like the celebrities of the imperial capital. They travel to ancient ruins and treasure vaults scattered across the world, risking their lives to claim hidden treasures. For the danger of fighting terrifying monsters known as phantoms, they're rewarded with wealth and honor. Then as the man walks, a tavern comes into view. He notes that today inside this tavern, one of the most powerful clans called First Steps is holding interviews for new party members. He explains that a clan is essentially a gathering of parties, like a mutual aid society. There's only so much an explorer can do on their own. If you want to climb to higher levels, it's crucial to join a strong party and grow alongside your allies. Then, while standing in line to get into the tavern, the man admits to himself that he was never able to reach that point. Suddenly, a girl behind him strikes up a conversation, asking if he's here to form a party too. Apologizing for the sudden chat, she introduces herself as Runa Runebeck, an explorer certified at level 3. The guy responds, introducing himself as Cry Andre, but then when Runa offers to shake his hand, he doesn't take it. She then seems surprised at the huge crowd gathered for the interviews and confides that she's been exploring solo until now, and she struggled with a treasure shrine called the White Wolf's Den, which led her to finally consider joining a party. Another explorer nearby overhears their conversation and scoffs, thinking Ruda is out of her depth for trying to tackle that treasure shrine at level 3, and he smugly tells her that a place like that isn't for amateurs like her. Ruda understandably doesn't appreciate being called an amateur by a total stranger, but the guy doubles down, explaining that First Steps is one of the top clans in the imperial capital. Sure, level 3 might be considered mid-level in the outside world, but here, it's basically beginner status. He advises her to turn around and go home, which only makes Ruda angrier, so she draws her knives. Before things can escalate, the guards conducting the interviews step in. They warn them to calm down, saying they'll be forced to kick them out if they cause a scene. The guard scolds them, reminding them that an explorer should never draw their weapons in the streets. With that, the tension settles, and the next scene shifts to Cry and Ruda inside the tavern. Ruda is taken aback by the sheer number of applicants and admits she's never been in a place like this before, so she curiously asks Cray if he's been through something like this before, and he casually replies that this is his 5th time. Ruda then surprisingly feels a little bad for him, but Cray brushes it off, telling her there's no need for sympathy. He then explains that being an explorer is all about skill. Talented people rise to the top quickly, but for those who aren't as gifted, it's a much tougher road. Ruda then points out a flashy party in the tavern, asking Cry about them. Cry informs her that they're the Holy Spirit's son called Ark Brave, currently looking for new members. They're the ones who recently conquered a level 7 treasure vault, and they're considered one of the best parties around. Their leader Ark Rodin is known for recognizing talent, and if he recognizes an explorer, that person's success is practically guaranteed, but Cray admits this is the first time he's seen them conducting interviews. Ruda then notices an empty seat and asks about it, but before Cry can answer, the rude guy from earlier butts in again, arrogantly declaring that Ruda is clueless. He says he'll enlighten her whether she wants it or not. Despite her telling him to stop, he introduces himself as Greg Zangief, a level 4 certified explorer. He points out that the empty seat belongs to the founder of the Grievers, one of the most respected parties in the capital. Cry then explains that the Grievers came to the capital a few years ago as a fresh new party, and they quickly rose to prominence due to their immense talent. Their official name is Grieving Souls, and as Cry reveals, they are the party of his childhood friends. Greg's still budding and mentions that rumors are swirling about the Grievers recruiting a new member for the first time in years, which is why so many explorers have gathered. However, Greg dismisses the rumor as false, pointing out that no one is sitting at the founder's table. One of the other participants speaks up, asking where the Grievers are. He boldly declares that he only came to join them because they're considered the best. Full of himself, he brags that one day he'll be the strongest explorer ever, revealing he's already a level 4 certified explorer. Suddenly, a girl from the management staff steps forward and confronts the loudmouth. Without holding back, she tells him to get out. Some of the other staff members rush to calm her down, reminding her they're not supposed to stir up any trouble today. But the girl isn't having any of it, and she snaps back, saying that her sister would have done the same thing if she were here. The tension builds as the two prepare to fight, and Cray, sensing the incoming chaos, tells Ruda they should get out before things get messy. Ruda follows him out just as the brat Gilbert tries to attack the girl Tino. But before he can land a blow, Tino quickly notices Cray's presence. She locks eyes with him, And just as Gilbert charges, she expertly dodges his attack and corners Cry instead. With Gilbert still flailing, Tino turns to Cry, calling him master, and asks what he's doing here. It's then revealed that Cray isn't just some random explorer, he's actually the leader of Grieving Souls and the clan master that everyone's been talking about. Cry begins to explain that everything started several years ago when he and his group left their village as fresh newcomers eager to explore. They quickly conquered several beginner treasure vaults, one after the other. But one day, while exploring a vault, a monster attacked Cray, but one of his friends killed it just in time. The friend praised Cry for acting as a decoy. Cry, however, knew the truth. He hadn't even noticed the monster was there. In that moment, he realized something critical. Though they all shared the same dream, their talents were far from equal. He recognized himself as just an ordinary guy in comparison and started to feel like a burden. He knew his friends were too kind to tell him to leave, so he decided on his own to quit the party. But when Cry tried to talk to them about it, they all dodged the topic, saying they still hadn't chosen a leader yet. Then the red-haired guy in their group suggested that Cray should be their leader, and the others immediately agreed, saying Cray was perfect for the role since he was good at giving speeches and motivating everyone, so Cray didn't even get the chance to refuse. Fast forward several years, and Cray is still the leader of the party, made up of his childhood friends. He admits that while he holds this role, he's long wanted to retire from being an explorer. Ruda then is still stunned and can't believe Cry is the clan master of First Steps, and even Ark joins in teasing Cry. Ark recalls how Cry had claimed he was late because he overslept, but now it seems like he was just secretly assessing the participants by blending in with them. Cry corrects him, saying that he really did oversleep, but Ark refuses to believe him. Cry then comments that much like Ark, most explorers just don't listen to people. Tino, visibly annoyed, says Ark is being downright rude and jokes that they should kick him out of the clan. Ark laughs, thinking Tino's sense of humor is hilarious. We also learn that Tino is a level 4 certified explorer, and Cry explains that she's a solo explorer in First Steps and also one of his childhood friends, as well as a disciple of Liz, one of their strongest members. Ark asks Cray if he's found any good candidates, and Cray, in his usual snarky way, wonders if Ark would actually take the person he recommends into his party. Ark, without hesitation, says he would because he trusts Cray's judgment, and the whole tavern is shocked to hear this. Ark's party mates try to warn him against it, but Ark stands firm, saying he'll only take in a single person suggested by Cray. Cray then asks if it can really be anyone, and Ark leaves it completely up to him. Cray thinks to himself that Ark really does have a big heart, though he notices one of Ark's party mates glaring at him for this. Cray then glances at Tino, and she immediately assumes he's going to choose her. She proudly declares that she's made up her mind to stay by Cray's side, now and always. She even adds that she has no interest in joining that wannabe handsome guy's party. Meanwhile, Gilbert starts causing a scene again, loudly announcing that he's going to be the one to join Ark's party. Cray recalls that Gilbert boasted about being level 4 and wonders if he's even in a party at all. Gilbert brushes it off, saying it shouldn't matter. Cray starts thinking that maybe this guy could be an asset if Ark trains him right. But Cray admittedly knows his eye for talent isn't great, so it might come down to luck. Cray then tells Gilbert he'll recommend him to Ark, but there's a catch. He asks Gilbert what he thinks is the most important thing for an explorer. When Gilbert can't answer, Cray tells him not to lose. He warns that if Gilbert lacks strength, he could put his entire party in danger. So Cray needs to see if Gilbert has what it takes. He casually mentions that ever since he became an explorer, he's never lost once. The crowd is shocked by this, though Cray thinks to himself that the only reason it's true is because he's never actually had a proper fight. Cray pulls off a ring from his finger and tells everyone that whoever manages to get their hands on this relic will be the one he recommends to Ark. He tosses the ring into the air. Gilbert catches it, but before he can celebrate, Tino sends him flying with a powerful kick. The ring rolls onto the ground, and suddenly the entire tavern erupts into chaos as everyone scrambles to grab it, so the place is turned upside down. Meanwhile, Cray casually slips out, leaving the participants to wreck the tavern over his little test. The next day, Vice Clan Master Eva Renfeed informs Cray that the tavern incident has made the news. She reveals that the venue was completely wrecked due to his reckless actions. Cray then immediately asks if there were any civilian casualties and is relieved to hear there were none. However, Eva adds that the Explorers Association wants to have a word with him. Cray wonders if Ark had anything to say about the chaos, and Eva tells him that Ark just laughed after reading the article. Cray shakes his head, thinking Ark's far too easygoing, and suggests they charge the repair bill to Ark's account and send him to the association as well. Eva sighs, telling Cray he relies on Ark way too much. This time, though, the association specifically asked for Cray. Realizing he can't get out of it, Cray grumbles, knowing he has to go or else the branch manager might come after him instead. He then complains about not wanting to leave without an escort and mentions that his disguise relic, a powerful artifact called Reversible Face, which allows him to change his appearance, has broken. Eva rolls her eyes, assuring him no one's going to attack him this early in the day. So with no other choice, Cry reluctantly heads out. Later, we see Cry groveling before the association manager, apologizing for the whole tavern disaster. He explains that no civilians were harmed and that once the chaos started, he couldn't stop it. He points out that the building was the only thing damaged, and surprisingly, no one has filed a formal complaint. To sweeten the deal, he mentions that the tavern's owner is a friend of his, and he's sure they'll forgive him. A young woman at the manager tells Cry to calm down, handing him a book. The association manager, Grack Welter, sternly reminds Cray that a high-ranking clan like First Steps should be setting a good example for others. Letting Cry off without consequences would send the wrong message. Cry, sensing where this is going, realizes he's about to get stuck with a chore. He explains that the Hunters Association receives all kinds of job requests, many of which are tough time consuming and pay so poorly that no one wants to take them on. Hunters call these unwanted tasks chores, and Cray is not a fan of the idea. Resigned to his fate, Cray flips through the list of available chores, most of which are meant for level 4 explorers or higher, but eventually he finds a level 3 task that seems a bit easier and snatches it up without thinking too hard about it, and we find out that he chose a rescue mission. Afterwards, we see Cry leaving the association and Grack watches him, thinking to himself that Cry hasn't changed a bit. He reveals that Cry, without realizing it, picked one of the most difficult-looking chores. Later, Cry discovers that Ark isn't at the guild headquarters, and Tino informs him that Ark has been summoned by some nobles. As Cry looks around and notices the place is empty, Tino approaches and shows him the ring he tossed the previous day, so Cray realizes she's the one who ended up with it. Tino proudly admits she didn't want anyone else getting their hands on his ring, and she nervously asks if she can keep it. And Cry tells her it's just a shooting ring, so she can have it. Then Cry casually asks if she's free right now. Tino, expecting a date, excitedly says she is, but her excitement vanishes when Cry hands her the chore he received from the association, so she horrifiedly bolts the second she sees it, but Cry calmly summons his magical chain Silver and orders it to bring her back. Moments later, Silver drives a reluctant and frustrated Tino back to Cry. She's visibly upset, accusing Cray of playing with her feelings. She thought he was asking her out, but instead he's saddling her with a crappy job. All she wanted was to get ice cream with him, not get stuck with an awful mission. She complains that the job is terrible and that as a level 4 explorer, there's no way she can rescue 5 people on her own. Cry agrees, nodding sympathetically, but Tino also adds that she already knows he's only sending her on this mission for her personal growth. Cry, scratching his head, starts wondering if the mission is really that tough since it's labeled as level 3. Realizing Tino just doesn't want to tackle the task alone, Cray decides to pair her up with 3 new recruits, Ruta, Gray, and Gilbert. Tino isn't thrilled with the arrangement, still hoping she'd be exploring alongside Cray instead, but despite her grumbling, Cray hopes the group will be able to handle the mission together. 6 years ago, when Cray's party first rolled into the capital, they were on their way to the association to officially sign up as hunters. But right when they reached the door, Cray started second-guessing everything. Luke told him to stop overthinking it, especially since Cray was the one who insisted they shoot for being the best in the capital. But Cray isn't doubting his friend's strength. He's worried because he knows he'll only drive them down. Luke told him to quit the nonsense and, without missing a beat, marched up to the doors, flinging them open with a loud declaration that he was the strongest swordsman in the world. Right after, Liz jumped in, shouting that she was the strongest thief in the world. With such a ridiculous, over-the-top entrance, there's no turning back. So Cray walks up to the reception desk to register the party, but deep down he's already hoping they'll regret making him the leader. So when asked to choose a name for the party, he picks the edgiest thing he can think of and calls them Grieving Soul, for absolutely no reason. The rest of the group hated it at first, thinking the name was dark and depressing. But the moment Cray tried to use his awful naming skills as an excuse to step down as leader, they all suddenly changed their minds, claiming they loved the name. Fast forward to the present, and Cray calls a meeting with everyone he's trying to dump his work onto. Greg, still in disbelief, can't wrap his head around the fact that Cray is actually the guild master of the Grievers. As crazy as it sounds, Cray confirms it, meaning he's also the infamous 1,000 Tricks that everyone's heard of. In the association, when a hunter hits a certain level of fame and achievement, they're given special titles, turning them into almost celebrity-like figures. Cray ended up with 1,000 Tricks as his title, but Gilbert refuses to believe any of it, since 1,000 Tricks is supposed to be the strongest person in the capital, and Cray looks like he's never even seen the inside of a training hall. Tino immediately jumps to Cray's defense, insisting that Gilbert is just too weak to understand Cray's power. Meanwhile, Cray's standing there, clueless as ever, wondering what power she's even talking about. He knows he only gets called the strongest because his friends constantly shower him with undeserved praise. But whatever, he asks if Gilbert and the others are going to take the job. Of course, Gilbert refuses because he's still not buying that Cray is the strongest in the city. Greg then tries to shut him up, nervous about what could happen if the actual strongest person in the capital loses his temper, But Gilbert, being the jerk he is, just shoves his fingers up Greg's nose. Since Gilbert clearly has no interest in cooperating, Cray shrugs it off and moves on to Greg. Greg's more than happy to accept Cray's request, so the only one left to ask is Ruta. Given that the quest is in a wolf den, Cray figures it's a perfect fit for her, since she was already planning to clear it. Ruta isn't exactly thrilled with the group she's stuck with, but she agrees to go along with it. Cray's pleased to hear that, so he tells Tino she can ask anyone else from the clan to help if she needs it. Tino, practically begging, pleads with Cray to join the team himself, but he shuts her down immediately. With Tino's party situation now sorted, Cray turns to leave, but of course, Gilbert can't just let things go. Upset that Cray's ignoring him, he challenges Cray to a duel. If he loses, he'll join the team. Cray, who absolutely hates getting dragged into duels, comes up with a quick fix. He agrees to the duel, but only if Tino fights in his place. Tino is more than happy with this arrangement, mainly because she's furious with Gilbert for daring to insult and doubt her master. She's also eager to show off her skills and give Cray a little demonstration of just how flexible she can be, throwing in some impressive camera angles for good measure. Gilbert might have gotten his face smashed in by Tino yesterday, but he's still running his mouth, claiming he was just caught off guard and that there's no way he'll lose to her again. And after he beats Tino, he says he's coming for Cray next. Cray, already irritated, has absolutely no desire to fight anyone today. But since Gilbert is so cocky, Cray casually points out that Tino is level 4 just like him. Tino chimes in, saying there's no way she could ever lose to someone like Gilbert, and to prove her point, she drops her weapons on the ground, daring him to fight. Ruta and Greg are getting nervous because sure, Tino's strong, but fighting without weapons seems like a terrible idea. Normally, Tino would win hands down because even though they're the same level, she earned all her experience doing solo missions and has tons of practice fighting other people, so she should win even unarmed. But Gilbert's got the Purgatorial Flame sword, which could tip the odds in his favor if he uses it right. Or at least it could have if he hadn't thrown his sword down too, deciding to fight barehanded. That was without question a dumb move, but Gilbert won't tolerate being looked down on, so he insists on fighting on equal terms. Now Tino's even more confident she'll win, so she casually mentions she'll grab some ice cream with Cray after she's done beating Gilbert up. Then as the fight begins, she charges at him, aiming for his face. Gilbert dodges the first blow, but can avoid the follow-up, a vicious kick to the face that sends him flying, just like last time. It looks like it's over, but to his credit, Gilbert gets back up and charges in again. Not that it helps, he gets caught in a chokehold almost immediately, but at least the guy's got some spirit. After some effort and training on his part, Gilbert finally manages to break free from Tino's hold. But unfortunately for him, the moment he does, she drops him to the ground with a clean chop to the back of his head, so he's definitely not getting up this time. As Tino celebrates her victory, she thanks Cray for helping her become so strong, even though Cray never actually did a thing to train her. Greg and Ruta are left absolutely floored by Tino's strength, while Gilbert just can't accept that someone might actually be stronger than him. Since the day he first picked up a sword, Gilbert always believed he was destined to be a hunter. His training allowed him to surpass professional swordsmen with ease, and when he finally reached the age to register as a hunter, he headed straight for the capital and formed a small party to start clearing vaults. Up until now, he had never known defeat. Even though Tino isn't fond of him, she still respects Gilbert's skill, so she encourages him to pick up his sword and keep fighting. But Gilbert's stubborn and his pride refuses, so Tino shakes her head, disappointed knowing that foolish pride like his is a one-way ticket to getting killed. As much as Gilbert hates to admit it, Tino's right. If this had been a real fight, he'd be dead several times over by now, so he's forced to confront the harsh reality that he's not as strong as he thought. Right then, Cray chimes in, casually guessing that Gilbert probably left his previous party due to a difference in strength. Gilbert is floored because Cray is spot on. Cray goes on to explain that he's dealt with similar issues in his own party, though he didn't quit, even if he might have wanted to. Gilbert totally misinterprets this, thinking it means Cray completely outclasses his teammates, and that Grieving's soul, the strongest party in the capital, is miles ahead of everyone. So this gives Gilbert a whole new understanding of what it really means to be the strongest. Cray then notices Gilbert's sword and gives it a light tap, just to see what it's capable of. At his command, flames immediately start pouring out of it, much larger than anything Gilbert has ever been able to summon. Gilbert is absolutely floored. He's owned the sword for ages, but has never managed to produce flames even close to this, let alone control them the way Cray just did, with a mere tap, and even without grabbing the handle. In this world, mana material is the lifeblood of everything. It's everywhere, just invisible to the naked eye. But inside treasure vaults, mana condenses into all sorts of physical forms, turning into everything from bizarre crystals to rare artifacts. The White Wolf's Den is one of these vaults known for spawning blood-soaked wolf phantoms. Naturally, Cray is more than relieved he sent the others down there and didn't have to deal with it himself. Eva, however, questions his decision. Was it really smart to send such inexperienced hunters into a place like the Wolf's Den? Cry waves it off, saying it's only a level 3 vault, and those 4 are pretty skilled for their level. Besides, he just has to thank Eva for the info on Gilbert, because watching Gilbert freak out when Cry randomly guessed a bunch of stuff about his past was pure gold. Eva's glad she could be of help, but she's more curious about how Cry handled Gilbert's relic like it was child's play, so she wants to know his secret. Cry shrugs, saying the relic was pretty straightforward. One of those he can control right off the bat. Even someone as green as Gilbert could use it with minimal training, so Cray doesn't see what's so impressive about it. But being the relic hoarder that he is, he's already debating whether to ask Gilbert to sell him the sword. Eva shuts that idea down immediately. Cray's already blown through a huge chunk of his budget on relic collecting. His collection is massive as it is, so why on earth would he need yet another one? Cray's eyes light up, insisting that each relic is one of a kind, and even though he's sitting on over 20 relic rings alone, there's always room for one more. Eva, realizing it's pointless to argue, just sighs. Sure, Cry has a solid income, but she can't let him blow it all on his obsession. See, the profits of Grieving's soul are split evenly among all members, regardless of what they actually contribute. So even though Cry barely lifts a finger, he still gets a fat paycheck every month. And there's no way he's giving up his relic addiction anytime soon. Then, when one of his relics needs recharging, he seizes the opportunity to dodge the conversation. He heads over to a member of the association and asks for a little help charging it up with magic, and they're more than happy to oblige since Cray's always doing so much for them. While Cray's relic is being charged, the guy helping him casually mentions a rogue phantom that popped up on the northern road and completely wrecked a caravan. There were 3 level 3 hunters guarding it, so this phantom has to be seriously strong. Now the Third Order Knights are recruiting for an extermination party. According to reports, the phantom was a wolf, and the location is near the White Wolf Den, meaning it likely came from there. There was probably a mass spawning of wolves, so the den is probably crawling with enemies at this very moment. Anyone unlucky enough to be down there is in for a world of hurt. Cry tries to brush off his concern, telling himself Tino's party is probably fine. But then the people around him start chatting about how the monsters in the White Wolf Den have been growing stronger lately, to the point where the association is considering bumping up its threat level. Worse still, a well-known level 5 Lancers party went missing inside that vault. So if even a level 5 teen couldn't handle it, anyone below that level doesn't stand a chance. Now Cray is seriously worried and decides to double-check the quest he received earlier. Only now does he realize it wasn't just a random mission, it was a rescue job for Lancer Rudolph and his level 5 team. Cray should have actually read the quest details before sending Tino and the others into that death trap, but it's too late to call them back now. The people sitting with him notice something's off and ask if everything's okay. Cray admits that he sent Tino into the White Wolf Den. The two are horrified, realizing that Cray sent a level 4 down into a vault that even a level 5 party couldn't survive. They assumed Cray knew how dangerous it was and sent her as part of her training, because what kind of reckless teacher would send his student into a deadly mission without researching it first? Cray, feeling the pressure, suddenly stands up, muttering that he's got something urgent to take care of. Once Cray gets into the halls, he starts having a full-blown panic attack. He tries to calm himself, thinking Tina is pretty skilled. Maybe she can handle this. And Gilbert is almost as strong as her, at least when he's got his flame sword. But then it hits him. He drained all the power from that sword during his little demonstration. So if Gilbert didn't recharge it afterward, that sword's about as useful as a paperweight. Cut to Tino and the others as they make their way toward the White Wolf Den. Even before they reach it, they can feel a dangerous aura closing in. Tino, however, was expecting something like this. After all, it was Cray who sent her on this mission, and she had a gut feeling things might get dicey. That's why she even wrote a will, just in case she doesn't make it back. Still, she's confident she won't die. In her mind, Cray's got everything perfectly planned out. She believes he chose each member for the mission with careful deliberation, though Greg isn't buying it. He reminds her that Cray only met them yesterday. Gilbert agrees it seems unlikely, but at the same time, he wouldn't put it past Cray to have already done a full background check on all of them before they even met. In fact, the whole incident at the pub could have been part of his plan. So while this mission is way out of their league, Tino is convinced that Cray wouldn't send them on a suicide run. Unfortunately, that's exactly what Cray did, and he's absolutely freaking out about it. Realizing he sent them straight into a death trap, he decides to rescue them himself. Rushing into his hidden room, he starts grabbing every relic he can carry. Meanwhile, Tino and the others encounter a phantom who is wielding a sword and wearing armor, and they are surprised as they were expecting a wolf. Back to Cray, while he is leaving, Eva catches sight of him and of course assumes this was all part of Cray's grand test for Tino. She figures he planned it so Tino wouldn't actually be in any real danger, but thinks he must be slightly worried, so he's going to check on them. Shiga notices he's carrying Citri's Slime relic, which by the way is totally illegal under Imperial law. But Cry doesn't know what he's walking into, so he's taking every precaution. Cry heads out onto the balcony and straps on a wingsuit relic, aiming to get to the White Wolf den as fast as possible. As he takes off, Eva watches him go, quietly hoping he doesn't end up like the last guy who used that wingsuit, who died after crashing headfirst into a wall. The story shifts to the past again, showing it's been a week since grieving souls began their work in the capital of Zabrudia. Luke's standing there, staring at his broken wooden sword, completely dumbfounded. How could it have snapped just like that? But the others in his group aren't surprised at all, saying it's no shock since he was fighting phantoms. One of them mentions she never expected to face a Cyclops in a level 1 treasure vault. They all agree it was one tough phantom, guessing it was at least a level 4. Then some random hunter shows up, doubting their story, but the girls casually show him the Cyclops head they took as proof. He freaks out at the sight, while Cry just shakes his head, thinking this is exactly why he told them not to bring the head along. Next, the scene cuts to Tino and the gang having just taken down a wolf-like monster, but they're absolutely spent. Ruta points out that this creature doesn't seem like something you'd encounter in a level 3 vault, and everyone agrees it was way too much. Greg then turns to Gilbert, asking why he didn't use the flames from his sword. Gilbert says his sword's out of mana because Cry had used it earlier, and now he can't recharge it himself. Ruta suggests they should retreat. The situation's not what they were led to believe, and the people they were supposed to rescue might already be dead. But Tino, stubborn as ever, refuses to back down, arguing they haven't even entered the vault yet. Greg then pushes back, saying survival is more important than any mission, but Tino calmly explains he's got it wrong. They're not here to collect corpses. She's certain those people are still alive, and they're just following the plan of a level 8 hunter. She goes on to say that even the purgatorial sword running out of mana is probably part of Cray's big plan, teaching them not to lean so much on relics. They then get closer to the treasure vault and notice several crimson wolves inside, all equipped with armor and weapons. It hits them that the wolf they faced earlier wasn't just some random outlier. There's more. So Tino then explains that the White Wolf's den was built to accommodate the massive Silver Moon wolf monsters that originally lived here. She's convinced the wolves won't be able to move easily inside the vault due to their size and suggests they head in to engage them. But before she can act, Gilbert, being rash as ever, decides to charge at the monsters, thinking he can take them down if he just disarms them. Tino shakes her head, thinking he's an idiot, but Gilbert, of course, insists the purgatorial sword is stronger than any regular weapon, even without mana. Tino, however, tells him to stop acting recklessly because she's the leader and her job is to bring everyone back alive. She's certain her master is testing her leadership, and bringing her team home in one piece is the bare minimum to pass the test. Tino explains her plan. She and Ruta, being the fastest, will draw the wolves' attention, while the others will attack from behind. She points out that once they close the distance, the wolves' ranged weapons will be useless. She makes it clear there will be no sacrifices, and she won't let anyone be used as a shield. Meanwhile, Cry is flying towards them, his only concern being that Tino survives until he arrives. He doesn't care if she has to use her teammates as meat shields as long as she lives. Back at the vault, Tino and her team follow her plan, and after some hard work, they manage to defeat all the wolves. But Tino exhaustedly thinks this job is completely unreasonable. As they're catching their breath, more phantoms appear. Tino then takes a moment to reflect on her team. She admits that all in all, the party lineup isn't bad. Greg works well with everyone thanks to his experience. Gilbert might be a loudmouth, but he's strong, and Ruta doesn't stand out much, but her enemy detection skills are spot on. In fact, it's because of Ruta that Tino has been able to focus on fighting. Then, as they take on the new wave of monsters, Tino thinks to herself that her master must have calculated every little detail, so he's like a god with how perfect his plan is. While fighting, Gilbert then starts thinking about his old party mates. He remembers how he pushed them too hard, frustrated that they couldn't keep up with him. He knew they were trying their best, but the gap between their abilities and his just kept growing wider. That's why he eventually left the party. Now that he finally gets it, he understands why they were so desperate. He realizes he never considered their feelings, and it hits him. He had no idea that fighting alongside a team as equals could feel this good. With that thought in mind, they defeat the monsters and make their way into a large room. Tino suddenly senses a presence ahead. She's convinced it's the boss, and it's a big one. Greg immediately cautiously suggests they run, but Tino unfazedly points out that they've come this far without a scratch, so why not take down the boss too? Greg remains hesitant, and Tino tells him that safe missions don't help people grow, but she admits that caution has its place, but sometimes they just need to go with the flow. Greg, after thinking it over, agrees she has a point. He then explains that once a hunter reaches level 4, they can make a living just by completing treasure vaults beneath their level. He admits that every time he thought a battle was unwinnable, he avoided it, and that instinct came from watching too many of his comrades die. Tino is sure Greg joined First Steps because he wanted to change that mindset, and she believes that's why her master placed him in this party. Greg isn't convinced, but Tino assures him that her master wouldn't have chosen someone he didn't believe in. She explains that her master's goal was to save all of them, and that he's like a god in how he operates. She's certain this group wasn't thrown together by chance. Everything was calculated by him. Ruta is still unsure and wonders aloud why he picked her of all people. Tino, after a brief pause, jokes that it might be because of her big melon. And without missing a beat, she continues ahead, leaving Ruta puzzled and blushing, asking what she even means by that. After that, we see Cry flying over the forest near the treasure vault, and of course he can't spot Tino anywhere. He grumbles that this relic is way too fast and wonders who the heck would make something without brakes. He enters the vault, crashing into the walls like a maniac as he flies inside. Meanwhile, Tino and the crew are facing the vault's boss, a massive white wolf. It lunges at them, but they manage to dodge, all thinking the same thing. This thing's way too strong. Tino then notices the boss isn't wearing a helmet, and she figures its head might be the weak spot. Determined to overcome this trial set by her master, she presses on. So Gilbert then steps up and blocks the monster's next attack, while Greg rushes in but gets launched backwards from the sheer power of the beast. Tino, quick on her feet, uses her agility to close the gap, dodging every swipe the wolf throws at her. Ruta observes Tino, and she is impressed because there's not a single shred of fear in Tino. The monster then turns its attention to Greg, and his sword snaps as he tries to block. The beast then moves in on Tino, but she takes the chance by climbing its weapon to deliver the final blow to take it down. But just as they catch their breath, they notice that the phantom manages to slash Tino's leg. Ruta rushes over asking if she's okay, but Tino waves her off saying she got a potion and quickly heals herself. Then we see that Greg looks distraught over his broken sword, but Gilbert bluntly tells him to be thankful he's still breathing. Greg agrees and sighs, saying they just got to find the missing people now, so Tino nods and hands him the sword of the boss they just defeated. Suddenly, they're ambushed by 4 monsters, all resembling the wolf they just fought. They can't believe 4 of them at once, so Tino feels the pressure, thinking this is way too much even for them, and she's left wondering what her master was thinking when he sent them into this mess. Greg, clearly anxious, asks what they should do next, so Tino quickly tells everyone to retreat into the narrow passage on the right because the monsters are too big to move well in there. But before they can make it, the monsters catch on and block their escape route, figuring out their plan. Gilbert and Greg then offer to act as bait, telling the girls to make a run for it. But Ruta hesitates, unsure if it's a good idea. But Greg insists it's better than all of them getting wiped out, and Tino, feeling stuck, wonders if this is seriously their best option. Lost in thought, she starts thinking about her master and suddenly remembers something. She then snaps back, telling everyone that no one's being sacrificed today, and she tells them to target the monster's eyes. Gilbert and the others rush to fight off the creatures just to give her the opening she needs. Tino recalls the training she did with the ring her master gave her, and with determination, she uses the same move to strike the monster's eyes, blinding one just long enough. Gilbert, seeing his shot, charges in, only to get hurled into the wall by the beast, getting wrecked in the process. Despite the pain, he mumbles an apology for jumping the gun, but Tino reassures him he did nothing wrong. As they're surrounded by 4 monstrous nightmares, it starts to sink in they might not make it out of this. Then out of nowhere, Cry crashes into one of the beasts, finally ending his wild ride, and Tino can't hide her relief at seeing him. Greg then quickly notices the creatures seem freaked out by Cray, but the monster that Cray crashed into, probably feeling brave, goes in for an attack, but one of Cray's rings protects him. The monster's shock is obvious when its attack fails miserably, and Cry, ever the showman, casually lies about having 17 lives. Then, without skipping a beat, he uses another ring to unleash a devastating blast, leaving everyone stunned by his insane power. Meanwhile, Cry, baffled by the strength of these creatures, wonders what the hell they are and questions if this is even still a level 3 vault. Despite his attack, the monster gets back up, leaving the others stunned. But Cray isn't surprised. He knows his shot rings are flashy but not particularly strong. Glancing at the weapons the monsters are carrying, he feels relieved that for once he brought 17 barrier rings with him. Still, he doesn't care about the rescue mission anymore. He just wants to go home, but unfortunately, the monsters aren't giving him that luxury. They prepare to attack, leaving him no choice but to use the necklace he's wearing. Cray drinks from the necklace, and then he tosses it into the air and shoots it with a shot ring, creating a cloud of smoke. And then he quickly tells everyone to run while they have cover. Then as they sprint away, the group can't help but feel that they're moving painfully slow. Ruta assumes Cry is keeping pace with Tino's injury in mind, but we soon learn the truth. This is as fast as Cry can run. As they escape, Tino reflects on her master's kindness, remembering the first time they met. Back then, she was being bullied by some rough-looking men, and it was the Grieving souls who saved her. After asking their name, she'd been determined to join them ever since. Once they finally manage to escape from the monsters, the group expresses their gratitude to Cry for saving them. It's only then that Cry notices Tino's injury, and he apologizes for sending them on such a dangerous mission. Tino reassures him, saying it's no big deal, and Cry praises her for doing so well despite the circumstances, and his compliment makes her visibly happy. Cry then pulls out a relic and uses it to completely heal her leg, and Gilbert shockingly can't believe Cry is using a relic just for healing. Cry, in his usual blunt manner, thinks to himself that he uses relics for pretty much everything. Greg, still processing everything, asks if Cry defeated the monsters. Cry admits he didn't and explains that running was the best option at that moment, and he urges them not to dwell on it and tells them to follow him. As they do, Cry has a sinking realization. He has no idea where they are or where the exit is, leaving him silently wondering what on earth he's supposed to do now. That's it for this video, guys. If you like this new series, leave a like for the next episode, and subscribe for more Anon content. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.